Next, we would like to welcome Mr. Terry Wong, Ward 7 City Councilor.
Thank you, everyone. And first off, let me again acknowledge our dignitaries, Andrew McLean, Mr. Guyver, Mr. Swanee, and Sabir. And on behalf of the City Council, Mayor Gondak, my colleagues, myself, it's a pleasure to be here. And it's also a pleasure to be here not only to represent the City Council, but also represent the Calgary Chinese community, as Brian's referred to, our Chinatown BIA, but also to represent the whole Chinese community across Canada. As many of you know, I came from Vancouver. My father was brought to Canada back in 1951. My grandfather came to Canada in 1919. He was born in 1899. And one of the things I want to say thanks to is again to all the stories you've heard today, starting from Jack when he referred to his family coming to Saskatchewan, as well as to Les and to Ron, to all the stories you've got. I want to say one thing in particular. What that means to me is that exactly 4 weeks ago, when I went back to see my mother, who was 89 years old, I went back to see my mother to help her prepare to move into a senior's home. But in doing that, what did I find? I found something that I was looking for a long time. What I thought was lost to a series of moves. I found my grandfather's landing papers when he landed in Canada in 1918. I also found his baptized papers, which I thought were lost. I also found his citizenship papers, in the 1950s. That means a lot. The stories you hear today means a lot to all of us. Now, I don't want to be selfish and talk about this as well. What I also want to talk about is a recent speech I gave over at Port Calgary as we dedicated the new 9th Avenue Bridge. We often talk about Calgary in our history, our roots of our Indigenous, our First Nations, the confluence of the bow and the elbow, how it brought, not just our First Nations people together from the States, from all parts of Canada. It also brought people from Eastern Canada, Western Canada. But how do they come? The railway. We talk about narrative on First Nations. We talk about narratives of how they create settlement, how they talk about the lands that we live on, the lands that we're proud of. But I am starting a narrative today, a narrative that started a long time ago. A narrative started in 1883 when we brought the railway here. We were going to talk about not just the confluence, the bow and the elbow. We were going to start talking about the confluence of culture that the railway brought to us. The confluence of culture where people, whether you're French Canadian, whether you're from Ontario, whether from BC, Europe, Asia, that's the story we're going to talk about. Because in Alberta, in Canada, and Calgary particularly, we have 37% of our population in Calgary, visible minorities. 37% of the population that has grown over the last 100 years. Over the next 100 years, that population is going to grow even bigger. That population is going to tell multitudes of stories. So I want to give thanks when I say that. I want to give thanks to the railway workers who built that for us here. I also want to say thanks not only to railway workers, but to the descendants who stayed in Calgary, who built our Chinatown, who built our culture. Many of you know, I think you know, we have 3 Chinatowns. This is the third, the second one by Palliser, the first where Calgary City Hall sits today. Calgary City Hall sat on the first Chinatown. Every time I sit in council chambers, I remind the mayor, I remind my council members, when we talk about truth and reconciliation, we're talking about truth and reconciliation of, again, our First Nations and all those that, I'll say our colonial society, for lack of a better word, has taken homage to, again, the cultures of our different societies. So with that, I want to also give thanks. I guess what I'm trying to say is that I want to give thanks to the descendants, more importantly, not just the ones that brought the railway, but the descendants who carried the stories. You guys, Teresa, for reminding us the struggles that we all went through. These stories need to be told. These stories need to be heard. Because for myself, Yes, I hear stories in Vancouver, I hear stories here. I hear stories in Toronto when I was there a couple of weeks ago. But these stories will not last once we pass on. These stories have to be told to people like Ryan and others, the young people. So share the stories. That's what it's all about. Thank you.
Please welcome Greg McLean, Calgary Center Member of Parliament.
MP for the MLA. May I offer special thanks to wonderful staff and volunteers of the Calgary Chinatown Association for the Nation. Together, we've built a great country, Canada, today 155 years old. Though we have shown our history to be less than perfect to those that have chosen to build their lives here, our redoubled efforts need to ensure we live in harmony and contribute to what can be an example for the world. This is our job. Once again, thank you to the Calgary Chinatown staff and volunteers for the tremendous work, and to all of you who are here today to commemorate all of the Chinese railroad workers. And allow me to wish you all a happy Canada Day as well. Shake.
We would now like to welcome Honorable Rick McIver, Minister of Municipal Affairs and MLA for Calgary Days.
Good morning, Nehoma. It's nice to see everybody here. It's Happy Canada Day, and it's I've got 155 years of this great country to celebrate. And while we're celebrating that, this particular event is about remembering some of the people that helped build this country, particularly the Chinese immigrants that built the railroad that holds this country together today. The railroad that it's the heart and soul and the main delivery point of our entire economy, built largely by and on the backs of the Chinese immigrants who were disrespected, underpaid. I learned this morning that the Exclusion Act that was passed on what would now be Canada Day, July 1st, if I heard that right, Ron, 99 years ago. If only the politicians took that day off, like you would expect us to do. And I don't mean to make light of it because it's a terrible, terrible injustice. But it really shows that while we have what I think is a great country, it can only stay great if we learn about both the good things that have happened and the injustices and the bad things that have happened. It's great to be here with leaders of the Chinese community, friends of mine for a long time, my former colleague Teresa Lupa, MP Greg McLean, MLA Irfan Sabir, MLA Rajan Sani, and of course my good friend Terry Wong from City Council. And the Chinese people have been here contributing since the very beginning of Calgary. Jimmy Smith worked at a hotel here in the city and either gave the first donation for the first Calgary General Hospital or one of the first donations to the Calgary General Hospital. So thank you to the Chinese community now and in the past. You've always been contributing, you still are today, and pleased to be here to remember all of that.
Welcome now, Rajan Sani, Calgary Northeast MLA. Thank you, and good morning to everybody who is joining today, gathering today to commemorate the Chinese railroad workers and to remember the history. We have talked about honoring the 17,000, as Mr. Lee has said, who walked into the void. And I heard somebody say to me recently that you know about the contributions of the Chinese community and their contributions to the building of the railroad and to Confederation, that few know. And that made me sad, because why is that? Why is that we don't talk about our history and about the shameful aspects of the history and how we move forward as well? As I look around, I see many dignitaries, I see many aunties, I see many uncles. Where are the young people today? Where is our youth today? So we can tell them these stories, the stories that Mr. Yi had mentioned, the stories that my own father told me My father worked for CPR in the early 70s, and he was a young man, and he would come home and tell us stories of the elders that he worked with from the South Asian community, from the Indian community, who talked about their contribution and their hardships as they worked tirelessly with their Chinese Canadian counterparts to build the railways. I know it's a day of celebration, but I also want to reflect on the fact that many of us have gone through a very difficult time as a result of COVID. We know in the early days that there was anti-Asian hate that was experienced by perhaps some of you in this crowd, but many people from the Asian communities. We say we need to learn from history. How much have we learned? Where do we go from here? And that is why I bring up the thought that we need more young people here to be able to hear these stories and understand that there is still work to be done. We need to learn from our history and even our recent history with our COVID experience to talk about who we are. And I say we because I include myself as part of this community to talk about who we are and where we need to go and how do we address the systemic discrimination and racism that still exists in society. I'm so honored to be standing here in front of all of you, in front of this majestic concrete structure in commemoration of all the contributions that the railway workers made. And I do want to say that it is Canada Day, and we should celebrate, but let us not forget that there is much work to be done as we move forward. There are community leaders sitting here right now. Let's not forget that there is a call to action to make sure that what happened during COVID and anti-Asian hate that was experienced is put to an end through education, through storytelling, through engaging our young people. Thank you so much to the organizers who put this event together today. Thank you kindly for the invitation. God bless you and happy Canada Day. We welcome now Irfan Sabir, MLA for Calgary Chinatown.
I'm honored to be part of this performance.
And then my mom's side, they were